So, Zach, I've brought you in here for a very, very important discussion today. I know that we've all been waiting for this answer. So the moment is here. Which one? iPhone or Android? Pick.
Is that really even a question? Of course it's iPhone.
Okay. Well, now you just shut off half of the listeners of this episode, man. Come on.
Good. Tell them to go away. Nobody wants an Android user in here.
Man, what are you doing? But you got to say both, man. You got to be in the middle as always, and can't pick a side, man. Can't pick a side. But more importantly, Zack Knight, everybody. If you want to put a face to the name, especially if you're not watching one of our video streams and you're on one of the podcasts, check out Zack Knight. We will definitely dig into his multiple companies, but be sure to check out his podcast. You can find him across all social media platforms at Be a Tactical Leader, and as well as his protection security company. We'll dive into that as well. It's at Knight Pro LLC, and that's Knight KNIGHT. Just
like your knight in shining armor.
Exactly. But how are you doing right now? Are you so clearly this episode is really going to be released during some crazy times. 2020 is going to go down as the year of what the fuck. And what are you doing? What's different in your life right now today?
Well, man, first and foremost, I'm super excited to be here, Miro. I know we've known each other for a few years and you've interviewed some high caliber people. So I'm not on their level, but I'm glad to be here. And anyway, I honestly thought, you said April 1. I thought this was kind of like an April Fool's joke you're playing on me, that I was finally, it's my big break right here. But for me, man, what I'm focusing on is staying motivated, staying structured. You know my military background, so a lot of what I already focus on is that daily structure and, from the morning routine all the way through having a daily plan of what you want to accomplish. And I think that's even more important right now is what are you accomplishing day to day instead of quarantining and chilling? What are you doing to push towards your goal to come out the other side of this as an authority in your field? And that's been a huge focus for me on, like you mentioned, both the podcast and with my security firm.
Yeah, so you mentioned your military background. I mean, before military, you were an officer as well. And
yeah, I was a dirty pig for about 7 years. I did all the fun stuff from gang investigations to narcotics and SWAT and you name it, and then got silly and wanted to blow up bigger stuff and join the military.
So how much has that, you said that it's making you still have structure right now in a day-to-day life? Because yes, you're right. We're quarantining and chilling. A lot of us are. Do you think it's important not to be doing that? Is that going to make things different for you when you get out of this whole thing?
Man, I think right now, if you don't double down on what your specialty is, and if you're focused on Netflix or Hulu or, now Disney Plus, what is that doing to benefit you long-term? We're going to have spending habits are about to change. I think this might have been the igniter to the recession we're all waiting on. Obviously, you see how much the stock market's dropped, right? So everything's going to change. There's going to be a new normal that comes out of this. And if you're not prepping yourself, especially as entrepreneurs like we are, if you're not prepping yourself and your business to propel forward out of this, then I feel like you're really missing a great opportunity where you look at 08, 09, 2010, in that 3-year period, more millionaires were developed than any other time in history, right? So if you're not positioning yourself to be that next millionaire because you're too busy watching Peaky Blinders, which is my big fatuation right now on Netflix. I'm just a little bit 1920s era gangster drama, man. Fantastic stuff. I was born in the wrong era.
I don't need new shows, man. Stop.
But I mean, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm not doing it. Yeah. I mean, of course you got to wind down a little bit and have a little bit, but if you don't have that, daily structure, then your whole day is going to be spent binging. And that's where I think the failure is going to happen.
And so what do you do, if you don't mind us? Not everybody here can say they've been both, an officer and, part of the military and went overseas. Not too many of us can, but from someone that has done that, what are you doing every single day? Can we get a quick glimpse into your life and what you're doing different right now?
Yeah, man. Honestly, a lot's changed. And you know me from before the deployment, during the deployment, where I was a 0-4 wake up and work out type of guy.
Mhm.
That was my morning routine. I'm gonna be
Zero
honest with you.
four, which is what, waking up at 4 a.m.?
4 a.m.
Okay.
4 a.m.
There we go.
Sorry. I'll be honest with you. During this little bit, I've had obviously businesses have been affected where people are wanting to meet in person. So I've been able to structure my day more virtually. So I might be sleeping until 6 a.m. now. Don't judge me for that.
Slacker.
Um,
Wow.
but it's
Wow.
been a total shift where
Uh-huh.
there are things that I still have maintained structure on where I'm still waking up early enough to work out before I start my day. That's huge to me to get that's my meditation time, right? I feel like you have to meditate and reflect. And for me, going to the gym and putting music in is that time for me. Part of my morning routine is obviously everybody has the chores. I got to feed the dogs, feed the cats, whatever. But a big thing is the gratefulness board we use as our mirror. We have a mirror dry erase marker that every morning my wife and I both write 3 things we're grateful for. And I think that's so important to look at right now because even in these hard times, you can still find something to be grateful for. You're breathing, there's fresh air, you have more family time. It doesn't have to necessarily be business related. For me, this morning I wrote sandbags because I do sandbag workouts at the house now, gym time, and a big shift, a huge shift for us. We don't have kids, but right now we're babysitting our goddaughter because her parents are law enforcement and healthcare workers. So they've
Mhm.
both been exposed to this COVID, and Heather and I haven't been. So now we're babysitting. So now we have a 3-nager. She's 3.5 and acts like a teenager. So we have a 3-nager in the house. And, that's been a huge shift for us because we're not used to that. So it's a different change. But at the end of the day, we still have to structure our day to make sure we accomplish business, personal, and now childcare, right?
Mhm. He's dropping some bombs this episode. Well, shout out to Bradley dropping bombs. But 3-nager, 04. Man, I mean, I've already learned more than I usually do.
I can't take credit for the 3-nager. That was my
it's a good
wife's term. It's perfect for it.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have to get the lowdown from Heather about how that came about. But did you have to lay anybody off or anything right now? Like, are you guys in a crunch at all? Are things different for you business wise?
Yeah, definitely a huge shift. And is really the panic. The people that went and bought all the toilet paper up
Yeah.
are the same people that I've had as clients that kind of panicked a little bit and canceled meetings, canceled certain things. So
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely had that issue. Fortunately, the way I structured my business was in preparation for a recession where I don't have full-time employees.
Mm-hmm.
I only had 1099 and I only employ law enforcement officers or veterans. So all my employees right now had about 10 folks. They're still working for me as the need arises, but they're full-time police officers. So one thing I structured is I didn't have that where I don't have to lay anybody off because they only work for me part-time.
Yeah.
I was just a little bit extra cash in their pocket, right? So I think everybody is hitting that wall where do you lay people off? Do you keep people? Do you fight through? And that's a tough thing depending on the industry. You look at like restaurants or hospitality, it's tough to maintain employees now. So
Oh yeah.
tough decisions, of course, that have to be made, either the survival of the business or, layoffs, don't layoffs. It's a tough time for folks.
Yeah, that's definitely a smart way of doing it because especially with law enforcement, right? They're pretty damn busy right now. So I can't see them. You, I guess, kind of got lucky with that part. But what about how does security come into play right now? Is it something that more people want because of all this? Are people like panicking about the possible looting or whatever trespassing that might happen, or are they staying away because it might be like a luxury service?
So what's interesting about the way a particular way I structure the business, we don't do alarm systems. We don't provide personnel for security. We are a strategic design and implementation firm where we actually design security protocols all the way from the environment around the building or your house. We
Mm-hmm.
do residential and commercial. So we design the environment around for safety and security, but we also go all the way into the weeds of what's the culture of the business look like? What are your policies? Do they align with your procedures? So right now is actually we're coming to the forefront. If you look back to the recession of 08, 09, crime rates rose, unemployment rose,
Mm-hmm.
and those two things usually go hand in hand. If more people are laid off, they're more desperate to do whatever they have to survive. So crime rates increased. So right now, we've actually moved more to the forefront where people are seeking us out, and we're very fortunate in this where people are wanting to plan for that now. Now that the panic has kind of subsided, people are like, all right, how do we come out of this and have a safe and secure environment for clients to come back to, for employees to come back to? The event space right now is huge for me, where venues and people that are throwing trade shows or conferences, they want to go an extra step to make sure they're doing everything they can for safety and security, so that in June, July, or later when events start coming back, how have they gone an extra mile to make sure it's safe for me to go and visit and bring that attendance back? So that's a huge piece of what I'm working on right now.
Can you give us any tips as to what you're doing for some of these clients in the, say, the event space, for example? I don't know if these are like $1 million questions that I can't ask, but is there anything you can share?
No, absolutely. And a big piece of what I did was I partnered with CDC. It's here in Atlanta, and we are Atlanta based. Now we'll go national. We're not limited to Atlanta or Southeast. So we definitely travel, but with me being here in Atlanta with the CDC, it's allowed me to partner with them on a couple things that have been pretty interesting, where I'm getting these guidelines from them about different things that you should be doing. And then we mentioned my podcast. I reached out to the director of WHO, the World Health Organization, to bring him on my podcast. And we're trying to iron that out right now to get him on. And, that's the beauty of being military, where I have some connections in other venues that people might not. So the big piece of what they're preaching, obviously there are regulations that they're recommending, but the social distancing thing will only go so far, right? The masks only go so far. It really boils down to projecting to your audience, whoever that may be. So in the event and venue space, it's attendees, right? You only make money if people show up.
That's it. Yeah,
so
right.
The big thing is, how are you marketing to them that you're going that extra mile? So what does that extra mile look like? You're talking like hand sanitation, hand sanitizer stations where you can get hand sanitizers easily. You're doing different things to minimize everybody touching everything. You're putting rules, policies out there that are outlining, the handshaking policy. I think social distancing doesn't necessarily mean you have to be 6 feet apart, but it should probably mean you don't shake each other's hand right now, right? You don't want to further that. So I think it's outlining procedures like that you want to highlight. Hey, we're taking these steps to encourage people to do this, this, and this. And that's what we're furthering during this conference or during this event to minimize the possibility. Because at the end of the day, it's not going to be eradicated by June. It's not going to be eradicated by next year. The flu's always been around. So where this is something that we didn't necessarily plan and predict, but you should have already had a little bit of something in its space where you're already trying to minimize germs being spread, right? Now it's just coming to the forefront of necessity.
So being, with your background, doing what you've done, do you feel what we're doing right now is enough, or do you think more force needs to be put into place? Just like in general, the social distancing measures that are coming out, the shelter in place rules till April 30th that were announced. Are we doing enough, or is this all kind of a fad type of thing?
I'm gonna take an unpopular stance on this one. I think we're doing too much. I think personally, just trying to be objective about things, the flu, the common flu, kills more people, has a higher fatality rate. As of right now, as of today, as we stand on April 1st, the statistics are showing that the flu is way worse, right? COVID is more contagious, but the flu actually has a higher lethality rate, right? Yes. So for people that are elderly people and they have autoimmune disorders, those rules should have been in place for them. So a shelter in place, absolutely. You don't want to bring vulnerable individuals out or have people go to where those vulnerable individuals are. But for people like you and I, early 30s, that are focused on business growth and providing things that folks need, providing essential duties, and even non-essential, like at the end of the day, yeah, I might get COVID, but it most likely won't kill me, right? The likelihood of it actually being damaging to me personally is pretty low. So I think it's been a knee-jerk panic reaction, but one
Mm-hmm.
big thing that I think has been come out of this that's smart for people. I talk about lean operations in my own organization. This virtual working space is going to be a huge factor, I think, moving forward. That is a big benefit to employees, but is also a big benefit to organizations because they're able to lean out a lot of what they're doing. And I think that's going to be a big thing that people should focus on right now is how do we lean out? How do we survive the recession? And now's a perfect trial run for all that.
So safe to say you think that the peak is here and that hopefully things might get better? Because, like, for example, yesterday I was doing a episode with my podcast partner, producer, and he was on the opposite extreme. We're all going to die. Uh, you know, those kind of scenarios. It's only going to get worse by fall, by winter. I'm not trying to bash any of his ideas. I think everybody should have their own, and it's kind of what you make of it. So, you think it's going to get worse, or do you think this is kind of it, going to taper slowly?
I think it's going to be deceiving. I think the number of confirmed cases are going to skyrocket. I think they're still climbing right now, right? Especially here in Georgia with the CDC. There are a lot of things filtering through Georgia. But what I think people don't realize is it's focused on now more tests are available. As more people get tested, there'll be more positive tests. I think the actual contagion, we've reached its peak. But the realization of how many people actually got it, I think there are people that had it in December and January that just had no clue and just assumed it was the flu. So I think realistically, the numbers will probably still climb, but the panic attached to everything should be on the decline, if that makes sense.
I hope so. I'm supposed to get married this summer, so.
Well, that's a whole different conversation
so.
and a whole different issue. We'll talk about that later. My condolences. But I'm just kidding. My wife just walked in the room when I said that, so I was totally kidding. Marriage is great.
I know it is, right? Hoping, just in case the fiance tunes in and listens. But yeah, that's one. Like, will they allow major events to go on and during the summer, right? Because let's just say it does come back and it stays like the flu does. It comes back in the fall and stays there in the winter. Will they allow 500, 1,000 plus person events to happen? That could be a game changer in its own. Will these big conferences, these big events, ever make its way back, or will it be a couple of years?
Yeah, and I that is a huge piece, which is where I'm gearing a lot of my messaging to help that industry, because I think there are things they can do. And, we can't, if you want to get in the weeds about it, we can. But to me, there's a constitutionality issue with government shutting down certain businesses. And that's more of my legal talk that I have a firm stance on about small government, big business type thing, where I feel like there shouldn't be that intervening. So it also boils down to, with the event space, like, your attendance might be down, but who's saying you shouldn't? Like, we have a conference, the nonprofit my wife and I own, we have a conference planned at the end of September. We're still planning to have it at the end of September because it's all about mindset, resilience, and overcoming trauma. What is a more powerful message right now than something like that for individuals that are struggling? So I almost feel like it's an obligation on the events, the venues, the showcases to maintain that community of people, because I think it's going to be so vital, where people are going to band together more now than ever. At least that's my hope, that it drives people back into that sense of community. And if folks aren't willing to put on the conferences, then you're right. It might just be something that dies off completely and goes virtual.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it, right? We can be hopeful. I'm being hopeful. I'm hoping things turn around and we develop something by then, and this kind of just, we look back at it and it's just a year of what the fuck, like I was saying. But yeah, business. Why business? Like, are you happy with where you're at right now? And would you have made the same decision, years back, to leave the force and be running a business? Like, do you think you made the right choice?
Oh, that's a good question, because there's so many intangibles attached to that, right?
Yeah.
Because the struggle, if we're being real, the struggle is real, right?
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, and we've had, a couple years of conversation around this topic where you knew me from right when I started night protection, and
Which was about 3 years ago.
yeah, right around 3 and change ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's one of those that starting it all, there have been days, and I just wrapped up my MBA and I have a couple other credentials in the security field. And it's one of those I could probably walk into a C-suite at a security company that's already established and just go grab a paycheck, right? I'm educated enough, I'm experienced enough. It'd be decently easy enough for me to go find that type of job. But when I look at that possibility, even though I've been in the military and the police and I have been authority, but I've also had authority over me, I still kind of have that problem with authority where I don't like necessarily having to fall into somebody else's structure.
Mm-hmm.
So like that entrepreneur fire in me, I think will always prevent me from actually going back into the corporate world, because, at this point I've tasted the freedom, right? I've tasted how successful I can be doing things, not necessarily on my own. Of course, there's always been people like you that have helped me through that and through tough times. But, looking at what I've been able to build, it's like, there's no turning back from that now. I've got the taste, and there's no going back into the construct of the corporate world.
Interesting to look back at it like that, right? Because once you're out and you drink some of the Kool-Aid, it's really, really hard to go back. Even through the tough times.
Right. It's just amazing to see. I actually, once I got back from the deployment, it was right at the beginning of this year. I was talking to a guy that knew me, that's here local in Atlanta, knew me met him around the same time I met you, right when I started my business. And, I was sitting there venting about, man, the deployment set me back. We're not where I want to be, so on and so forth. And he's like, hey, man, be objective about what you're talking about. Your problems of today are the dreams you had 2 years ago, and that put such a great realization on me of, man, thinking back to 2010, 2011, 2012, when I was a newer police officer. Think about the struggles I had there of, oh man, I'm making 40 grand a year. I'm making a lot of money. Then the next year, geez, I'm only making 40 grand a year. And now, I'm not even attaching it necessarily to income and revenue, but it's like thinking about the overall happiness of, I'm not on night shift working overnight. I'm not dealing with the worst of situations, from death to gangs to drugs. Like, man, I don't think I could turn back, man. It's like there's been so many more things that I've opened my eyes to outside of the government world that even just something like this, like podcasting. Like, I didn't listen to podcasts before I started my business. Like, it just wasn't something that was in my realm of influence. And now I have my own, and I'm meeting people all across the country from that. And it's like, how do you go back into, and not judging those that like that? Like, more power to you if you're happy in that, not trying to badmouth anybody, but me personally, now that I've seen this and I've, have shared business struggles and shared life struggles with folks like you and, the different masterminds we've been in. And it's like, man, I can't do it. I just can't do it, man.
Yeah. And it's funny because you would tell me, podcasting, come on, I'm not going to ever do a podcast. Why would I be on a podcast, let alone do my own podcast? Here we are.
Yeah,
couple years later.
Right. I'm a little bit late to the game.
What is this thing? You actually have, like, I don't interview too many people that have actual mic setups like this, I mean,
hey man, you gotta be looking sharp, gotta catch up to you in this podcasting world.
Fancy. But yeah, kind of back to that. You mentioned that clearly you've gone through some bad times, it sounds like. Can you share any of these dark moments, and what keeps you going? Like, this entrepreneurial world and life that we know now it's not easy. At times it's very very, very lonely. There's not many people to relate to, and why are you still doing it?
It's the tough times are the tough times, and in the policing world, I was involved in several situations, and you kind of just see the worst of the worst every day, right? So I've seen kids die in my hands, or I've had kids die in my hands. I've seen children die. And that was always like the hardest part is children, that, innocent folks that are just whatever has happened. So there have been those situations that were tough. In the military, I lost a couple guys on an operation. The 1 year anniversary when we lost them was actually last week. So that's still tough for me to talk about. I mean, it's, at the end of the day, we all signed up to do a job and we all signed up for that mission. And I think not talking about them does them a disservice. So I always like talking about Joey and Will and the sacrifice they gave for us. But you talk about tough times. Those are tough times, right? And I think that gives me a different perspective on business, where every time I have a struggle that I'm facing in business, I think back to, one, at least I'm still here. I'm still furthering my voice and my mission. But two, it's not any worse than anything I've had to overcome in the military, on SWAT, and law enforcement. It kind of gives me a different perspective, where this whole COVID thing, I feel like it's an overreaction, maybe because I've seen much worse than most people have seen. So maybe I have a totally different stance on it because my perspective from my background is totally different. Where to me, this isn't a big deal. I know we'll get through this because I've gotten through much worse. So to keep motivated, to actually answer your question, because I got so long-winded on that.
This is great. Great stuff.
To actually answer your question, motivation drives back to my why, and my why has even changed over the years, where my initial why came from stuff that happened in law enforcement, and I thought I could provide better service to people, which is where night protection came up. And then the tactical leadership brand and the podcast came up because I'm fascinated with leadership, and I'm fascinated with talking to people and meeting people and hearing stories like your own. You're on my show, and hearing stories of, I already knew your story, but then sharing your story with my audience to see the struggles you've overcome. Like, what's more motivating to see other people like yourself that have, I remember the times when you were in the dumps about things, right? And I remember the struggles, and, to see the growth. Like, what better motivation is there than to be in a community like we're in and see people be vulnerable, see people be struggling, but still take that next step, because there's always going to be a next step. There's always going to be another day. There's no reason for there not to be right now. And that's something to be grateful for, where there's always a tomorrow. Tomorrow might suck. The next 2 weeks really might suck. Yeah. But 3 months from now, COVID might be a thing of the past. Next year, nobody's going to think about COVID, just like we don't think about H1N1 or Y2K. Like, Y2K was a huge thing 20 years ago.
Y2K, baby.
And people panicked about it, but it lasted all about 2 or 3 months, right? Mm-hmm. So it's one of those that, looking forward, there's so much possibility out there. And that's something I've really opened my eyes up to in business, is there's so many possibilities that fit into my passion, and sharing my passion of safety and security and leadership with people that motivates me, because you always get a little bit of that feedback of, man, that really correlated, that message, that post, that interview really correlated and motivated me. And whenever I hear that from somebody, it's like, man, I'm obviously on the right track. I'm doing something right. And that just, what better driver is there than realizing, even if it's one person, you're helping that one person through a tough time.
Yeah, I think it's very important. Exactly what you said. And if there's anything, something that you get out of this, it's so important to make sure hang out and be a part of communities that our other entrepreneurs are in them, because you are not the only one going through it. You're not. We weren't the only ones, meeting each other, meeting others in our groups, helping each other out. Like, those are the moments that really help us through those dark times. Because chances are your family, your friends, wife, husband, they might not, you're blessed. Like, Heather knows what's going on because she's dealing with similar things, but a lot can't relate to what you're doing. They can't. And we're here for you. We always are.
Yeah. And I think, community is so important. And I remember during when we went to Las Vegas at the end of that first mastermind we were in together, I shared at that point, I was a month from going to Afghanistan, and there was a little bit of panic in there, my first deployment. Right. And
I remember that.
But it was that group, and I still talk to the majority of that group. I'm still involved with the majority of that group because we were able to connect so well. But it was that community that kept me going in business. We were going to shut down business. I'm like, there's no way Heather, Lord bless her, So Heather, to give a shout out to the military spouse of the equation, Heather was 25 years old. Well, when I left, she was actually 24. So she's several years younger than me. She was a full-time police officer, ran my business full-time, launched our nonprofit, finished out her master's program, had her first delve into real estate. She sold a house and bought another one, moved us into that, all while being my sounding board. So where I was talking a little bit more about the deployment. I was the highest ranking guy on the operating base I was on, the 5 I was on. So in the military, you can't like talk down the chain of command. Like if I have a bad day, I can't go to my right-hand man that's lower ranking and say, hey man, this is what I'm struggling with. You have to maintain that sense of authority. Right.
Huh.
So the only person I could talk to was Heather, once or twice a week, where she just got the like deluge of all the BS I was dealing with from, the dumb soldier that made a mistake that, I got an ass chewing for, all the way to when Joey and Will died. I couldn't go and cry on my subordinates' shoulders. I didn't have that outlet. So Heather was that outlet. So you talk about me being blessed, and I give her such a hard time, but having somebody like her in my life, man, talk about a superstar. She's the one that needs to be on this show because she absolutely killed it, man. And there were so many struggles that she helped me overcome and that she overcame. And having that person, and having that community of support like y'all. Like I stayed in contact with a lot of y'all through the deployment, and every once in a while I'd get a message from, hey man, just checking in. It's like, shit, people are still thinking about me even though I'm a world away, and surrounding yourself. I'm a big believer in you're the sum of the 5 people. That quote that you become more of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most, and finding that within a community of like-minded individuals is so key to maintaining motivation and maintaining the path you want to go on.
And are you currently still active at all, or?
Yeah, I'm still National Guard. They actually are talking about activating us for all this. My rank, given what my rank is right now, I most likely won't be activated. I'm not necessarily on the grunt end of things where I'm more on the strategic planning aspect, and they don't need a whole bunch of us right now. They need a whole bunch of people to carry stuff. So, so I'm still involved. I have another deployment geared for 2022. It sounds like maybe 2023. So still in that service aspect for the good old US of A.
And how does that change with because you still have to run your life, but then you still kind of have that. Because once you're in, right? And like, how does that change your life every single day and every year right now?
It adds an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
I still have a monthly, at least once a month obligation, military wise. So I still have to show up. I still have 40 guys I took to Afghanistan that I have to stay in contact with. They all shared that same experience with me. So it's not like coming back. They're no longer my responsibility. And we've had soldiers, several got divorced, several got arrested. Several have had things where mentally you don't come back the same. Right. So even though I might not be active duty, it's still an active lifestyle where I have soldiers and I have guys, and we still are that same, like a different community, right? We still all have to be there for each other, but it's definitely an impact, trying to game plan. That's why I've kept the business as lean as I have, just in case where, if I do get deployed again, I want to make it as easy as possible for Heather to maintain, and for business to continue to succeed. So it's kind of, it's a looming aspect, but it's part of service. It's something I love serving. I love having the connections I've made in the military, and it just furthers so much of what I want to do and be a part of that, I can't see it being any other way.
Do you keep in touch with all of them as much as since the, maybe they're not all doing business related things right now? Do you keep in touch with them as much from your former military friends?
Yeah. So a lot of them, it's interesting. And this is where part of my reason for joining, I wanted to lead troops in combat. Like that was my big thing. I wanted to be a platoon leader responsible for 40 guys in combat. Careful what you ask for, because that's exactly what I got.
It sounds like a good amount.
But what was interesting is I took, when we activated, National Guard's a little bit different. So I didn't even have these 40 guys until October. And we were end of October is when I got the 40 guys. We were in combat at the beginning of January. So you talk about bonding, like for me, a test of leadership was how do I get these 40 guys on the same aspect, in the same mission, in the same mindset, where I say two words and they react, not, oh, that dude's a dumbass, right? You can't have that type of issue. So you have to grow this community. And, we spent 2.5 months in a train up before we went to Afghanistan, and they became my family. And the running joke of structure is that as a officer in the military, I'm like the platoon mom, and my platoon sergeant, my right hand, is the dad. He's the disciplinarian. He's the one that if somebody needs to boot up their butt, he's the one that does it, right? So I'm platoon mom. So when you look at the more nurturing aspect is,
I could see that.
Right. Thanks. But yeah, so, it comes back to in that role. It's truly my responsibility to stay in touch with those guys where, hey, even if it's just a monthly check-in, I think there's got to be some level of responsibility on my part as a leader in the military, as a leader in general. Like, it doesn't change any different from right now in business where the manager, the CEO that is no longer seeing their people every single day, which is a situation I'm in. I don't see those guys every single day. It's still the responsibility to keep them realizing that they're in the forefront of your mind. So reaching out and staying in communication with them during this tough time, right? So that's where a lot of where I love the military and where I've learned in the military, that exact scenario is now happening across business. So I can directly correlate the lesson of coming back from the deployment, having to maintain a more or less virtual relationship with these guys to now in business. How can I help my clients? How can I help organizations maintain that relationship to that same extent while building a successful culture in these really crazy times nobody was exactly prepared for?
It's interesting how you kind of aligned it all, right? Like everything you're doing, whether it's your business, your podcast, your former job, you're serving, like it's all in the same sort of group and it's aligning together. You think, is that something that keeps you interested since like you're not venturing out and starting like a bicycle shop or something?
No bicycle shop quite
or,
yet.
Little ice cream parlor.
Right.
I can see you doing that though.
I think one of the parts of what I've learned in business, and if you can objectively look at larger organizations, look at Amazon, for instance. Amazon got tired of paying somebody else to deliver packages. They got tired of getting a cut from or having to take a cut out of Whole Foods. So they bought Whole Foods, right? They've literally acquired different organizations to further their mission. And I feel like it's no different than what I've done in structured business life around is right now we own 4 organizations that all feed off each other. We're looking at opening a 5th that will kind of feed into that as well, where my military feeds right into night protection. From connections to experience to training, feeds right into that, which feeds right into our nonprofit for domestic violence victims. We have a long-term sustainability program we have for them. It's a 3 to 5 year program. As part of that, we own a real estate holdings firm that the nonprofit rents real estate from. So instead of having to go pay somebody else that has total control of our facility, now that's us, right?
No, and then on top of that, right. No one's stopping you from doing that. These are acceptable ways of going about business. And
that's the big thing. Yeah, that's the big thing. Like I feel like you have to be aligned, and that's like me staying authentic to myself, right? It all aligns and feeds off each other, where I've made it a point to keep that aligned because that keeps me happiest, right? I'm passionate about serving. I'm passionate about safety and security. I'm passionate about leadership. Well, now each one of those organizations just kind of furthers my core values, if that makes sense. I think that's a huge piece that people should realize for like ultimate happiness. That's such a great way to structure your life is make sure everything you're doing kind of feeds off of your core values and interlinks with each other. So you're not off in the weeds creating an ice cream shop that don't get me wrong. I love ice cream, but might not be in alignment with exactly what I'm working on, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And we are slowly winding down on part 1 of the podcast. Everybody that's tuning in, be sure to check out Zack Knight that's such a weird way to say it, at at Be a Tactical Leader, as well as at Night Pro LLC. His podcast, Tactical Leadership, is live on pretty much all major podcasting platforms. Be sure to check it out. But now, for this next part of the show, our listeners' favorite part, Miro is going to be leaving the episode. So stay tuned.
Welcome to the round with no name because they're all taken.
Miko, his evil twin, is here. Zach, this is the most serious round and part of the podcast. You will have 5 seconds to initiate an answer for all the questions that I will be throwing at you. We want to know
that spin was amazing. I know they might not have seen that spin, but that spin was amazing. Sorry, I have to point that out.
Well, if you don't see the spin, be sure to go on our YouTube. And it's called the Two Boss Podcast on YouTube, as well as just search PodRiver Media. That's our main site. But anyway, you will have 5 seconds to initiate an answer. We just want to know a little bit more about the real Zack Knight. So without further ado, what is your favorite book?
Extreme Ownership, Jocko Willink, Leif Babin.
Seems like you were ready for that one. Got to throw more curveballs at you. Who have you been most nervous to talk or meet?
Ooh, that I've already met or that I want to meet?
That you have.
Oh, I don't really get nervous around people.
Oh man, you never got the stomach, the queasy feeling ever? Questioning it in your mind, you're like, oh man.
No, I never had the chance to meet Paul Walker, my one man crush, and I haven't met any of my top female celebrities yet. They might make me a bit queasy, but so far so good.
So which one? Which one would make you the most nervous then? Well, you put it on the spot. I mean, now we need to know.
You're gonna get me in trouble when my wife hears this. Emily Ratajkowicz. I can't even pronounce her name.
I know who you're talking about. No,
yes, sir.
No more needed. Okay.
She would make me queasy. Yeah.
Stranded on an island. What is the one item you want with you? Can't be a person.
A blade of some sort.
Ooh, that's a good one. I think we've definitely had that answer a few times, but that is a solid answer.
Or a cell phone. I mean, if we're being smart, like, let me get a cell phone to call, right?
I mean, you might be the only one left on the planet, so and the battery's going to run out. I don't know. I'm not sold on that answer.
Blade it is then.
How do you drink your coffee?
Ooh, I like my coffee.
Here we go.
Some
Kahlua, and extra cream, extra sugar.
How honestly am I able to answer this question?
As honest as it gets.
So I like my coffee like I like my women, much like my wife. I like it hot, black, and strong.
All right. Well, this transition is perfect because the HuffPost has a study out there. And if you drink black coffee, there's a good chance that you show some kind of psychotic tendencies.
I believe it. Absolutely.
Boom. There it is. There it is, people. There it is. All answers will be explained one day. If you had an unlimited amount of money and you can start up any business you want, can't be your own though. What business would it be?
CrossFit gym.
Man, wasn't that a thing of like 10 years ago?
Whoa, you asked anything I wanted. Don't judge me for it afterwards. Like, I just want somewhere I can work out that COVID won't shut down,
CrossFit gym. All right. Making a comeback. Let's bring back Bally Total Fitness while we're at it.
You know what? I even think I could get Richard Simmons if we want to go like really old school, do a little hip hop jazzercise before that was a thing.
I like it, man. I like it. How many children do you want?
2.
Okay. I was waiting for some crazy answer, but
Nope.
No, 2. That's okay. Heather could hear that one. And last but not least, if I showed up at your office right now and I was like, Zach, I got $1 million idea for you. a $10 million idea for you. Like this is going to make us rich. And I walk in with boarding shorts and socks and sandals. How serious would you take me?
One of the biggest business inspirations I have is Jesse Itzler. I met him a couple times. He's a local Atlanta guy. If you don't know him, look him up. He went from being a rapper in the early 90s to owning a private jet company, to Zico coconut water, all the way to now the Atlanta Hawks. Every time I've seen him, he's been in pretty much a white undershirt, shorts, and sandals. I would take you extremely serious because on the outside, if your idea is good and I can help you execute it, I don't care what you look like on the outside, because it's those people that have those phenomenal ideas like the Jesse Itzlers of the world that are really the creatives that come up with those phenomenal ideas.
Good. Because
you got board shorts and sandals on.
Sandals,
all right.
baby. No
What's our $10 million? What's our $10 million idea? Let's do it.
Well, clearly we're going to talk about that one off the air, but you have survived Miko. He is out. All right. Miro is back. Hope you survived. Hope you survived with Miko. He is quite the twin.
Quite a character.
I don't ever get to meet him personally, but I hear many things. But Zack Knight of Be a Tactical Leader, as well as Tactical Leadership Podcast and at Knight Pro LLC. Check him out across all social media platforms. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Definitely looking forward to what's to come, and the mic is yours. You can close it out.
Oh, man, I just appreciate it, Miro, and I'd love to tell the audience to stay motivated during all this. We're all going to see it through.
We will. Mic drop.
That is all for this episode of Boss to Boss. Your next step is to visit bosstoboss.com, where you will find proven techniques followed by professionals to help you make that next step. Again, that is boss2boss.com. And remember, the time is now.